Welcome back to the Rapid Transformation Intensive. We are now in week 3 of April, and in this training, we are going to do a deep dive on thesis. Before we get into that, please take some time, pull out your journal, and dissect not only your week 2, but also your April as a whole. What is the key progress you made in week 2? Remember, it is a canvas. Hopefully, your week 2 was equivalent to a quarter at least. And so please take a time to actually look at and think through. My invitation is that bigger things happened than you likely think. I want you to make not only your future bigger, but your past bigger too, and also week 2 bigger. But also don't just look at week 2, but look at April as a whole, week 1 and week 2 combined. What are you seeing? I invite you to look at specific actions and events that took place. What do they signify? My guess is that as you're operating more and more as your future self and from your future self, that you are actually seeing new things come into your life. I love the quote, you do not attract what you want, you attract who you are. And so as you be your future self and as you operate as your future self from the impossible goal, you'll start to see things dramatically different each week. And so I want you to take note of those differences. I want you to take notes of those events as well as the actions that took place and actually write them down because those are evidence of your future self and they mean a lot. As I was dissecting my week, I was looking at some of the things that happened, which may even seem a little bit more mundane because of how much I'm operating as my future self and how much things are happening, how much things are changing. But if I look at each of those events or situations or just experiences or even my own actions in isolation, I'm actually seeing that I'm fulfilling my future self. I'm transforming into my future self. Little things I'm doing, which are not that little, and from the perspective of my past self, are actually incomprehensible. If I look at last week and what happened in last week and in how I operated last week and in some of the actions and moves I made last week, if my past self, say 5 or 10 years ago, had looked at some of those actions, they'd be shocked that I'm able to do some of those things in a single swing, or that I'm able to experience so much in a single day or in a single week. So I want you to look at the specific things that occurred, the events, the actions, the outcomes, the conversations, what you did and how you did it, and what do those things mean? Also, think about this. How are you different in quarter 2? How are you different? The person you're being, the person you're operating as versus who you were operating as in Q1, but also go back to 2023. How are you different from who you were in Q1, but also how are you different from who you were in 2023? How has your floor changed, right? Your floor is in my mind, actually the system of your life, and it determines what you say yes and no to. What are the things that you're saying no to, you're ignoring, you're avoiding, you're stripping away that even last quarter you weren't stripping away? You were saying yes to, but also in 2023 you were saying yes to. You were letting consume you. Take some time to truly reflect, define, and transform your Q2 as well as your April so far. Then thinking about week 3. As I discussed last week, each week is a quarter. Each week is a canvas. Each week is a creation. And so I invite you to build off of weeks 1 and 2, but again, to operate from your impossible goal. As you operate from your impossible goal, each week will be different. Each week has a different bottleneck. The bottleneck being the thing that you really need to advance, the thing you really need to focus on. Quantum time is about depth. It's about slowing time down by making such phenomenal and even what I would call non-linear progress. Non-linear progress, meaning if you look at week 3 alone, if you just look at week 3 and you compared it to week 2, you wouldn't be able to see the progression because week 3 becomes so fundamentally different because you're operating at such a different level. So April is huge. April is massive. Weeks 3 and 4 are massive. So my question is, what canvas will you create in week 3? How will you elevate and transform your life? Operate from the goal in week 3 and change everything. In week 3, I'm going to change everything. Week 3 is going to be so meaningful, so powerful, so special. But it's going to look different than week 2. It's going to look different than week 1. April looks very different than March. How are you going to create a masterpiece, a canvas, operate as your future self, even differently than week 2? It's okay if it looks very different from week 2. Week 2 was a week in and of itself. You're no longer that person. You're not the same person you were last week. You now know better. You can operate better from the goal. You can commit better from the goal. You can strip out more from the goal. Week 3 is powerful. Let week 2 be what it was. You get to frame it. You get to think through it. You get to learn from it. But week 3 is different. Week 3 is better. Week 3 is more powerful. What are you going to do in week 3? All right, so we're going to spend the rest of this time talking about thesis, and I invite you to go through the thesis tool. I actually invite you to submit your one-page thesis as well. But before we jump into that, let's watch a quick clip of Elon Musk, because his thinking is very similar in my mind to Buffett, Munger, people who really continuously transform their frame, their floor, and their focus. And all three of those things ultimately end up becoming your thesis. Your frame is your view of reality. It's your perspective. It's what you think matters. Your floor is ultimately your standard and what you say yes and no to. And your focus is where you're going to execute on your frame. And my invitation is that your frame, your vision, your perspective should be from the perspective of your impossible future self and from an impossible goal. That frame clarifies a much higher floor and a much more intense focus or execution. And focus and execution are really about how you become your future self. And yes, the execution is very difficult and different for an impossible goal, but you can do it. You can execute on the new thesis. So let me go ahead and let's start with this video from Elon Musk.
Everyone's wrong, no matter who you are, everyone's wrong some of the time. The most common error of a smart engineer is to optimize a thing that should not exist. Why would people do that? Well, everyone's been trained in high school and college that you got to answer the questions, convergent logic. So you can't tell the professor your question is dumb, that you'll get a bad grade. You have to answer the question. So everyone's basically, without knowing it, they got like mental straitjacket on. They'll work on optimizing the thing that should simply not exist. Just make your requirements less dumb. Your requirements are definitely dumb. It does not matter who gave them to you. It's particularly dangerous if a smart person gave you the requirements, because you might not question them enough. No matter who you are, everyone's wrong some of the time.
One of the things I want to say here is that you likely have given yourself many requirements to be and become your future self. As an example, in thinking about the quantum leap, right? Your 3-year vision. In the first coaching call, my friend Gabriel, who had a 20-year plan, my guess is that many of the requirements, the things he thought he needed to do and be to achieve his future self, were false assumptions. The idea of questioning requirements is the same as questioning assumptions. It's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And so first principles thinking ultimately questions the assumptions. You got to question so much of what you think must be true to realize your future self. Think about the things that you think must be true in Q2 or in week 3 or in April. And I want you to question much of what you're doing, because much of what you're doing and who you're being is based on false assumptions that were given to you or that you developed in your past. And so questioning your assumptions is crucial to developing a thesis. Questioning your assumptions, questioning your perspectives, questioning why you're doing what you're doing. This is the first powerful step. One other just quick thing right here is the idea that most people are optimizing a thing that should not exist. That was, for example, me optimizing my YouTube channel. In my view, I got to the point where I realized that thing should not exist. It's not that it doesn't need to exist, but it's not the thing I want to optimize for. And what you optimize for is very powerful. As you get clearer and clearer on your future self, you've got to ask, how do I want to build the system of my life, the system of my business, the system of my process? For me, the thing that I want to optimize ultimately, which I believe, this is part of my thesis, the thing that's more anti-fragile, and I got this idea by studying that book, Anti-Fragile. In that book, he says it's fragile to overly have to promote yourself, whereas it's anti-fragile to create stuff that's so good that other people promote it for you. So for me, part of my thesis, part of what I want to optimize my life, my business, my time, my brain for, is writing better and better books that are so good that other people market them for me via word of mouth marketing. And so rather than optimizing and building a massive YouTube channel, which is fine, I'd rather be more dialed in. I'd rather question that assumption, let that go, and optimize what I truly want to optimize for me. Again, relate to my future self. This is going to be different from you, but I love what he's saying because so many people are optimizing something that should not exist. And so my question for you is, what aspects of your life, your business, your time are you optimizing that simply should not exist? Because if you're optimizing those things, then by nature, you're not optimizing something else, which may be the thing that actually you should be optimizing for. I'm not going to name this person by name, but me and a friend were discussing this idea, and we were discussing one of our favorite authors. And we were talking about how this author has recently come out with a book, and he's come out with many books over the previous years. And it's clear that he's no longer optimizing for writing phenomenal books. He's putting out books and they're interesting, but they're not as good as his prior books. It's obvious that he's actually optimizing for other things. In his case, it is actually having a big platform, a big podcast, publishing on various platforms. And so he's optimizing for other things, not the books. And it's clear that his books are no longer the the core aspect of his thesis, which is fine because, again, he has his own goal. And so one point here that really matters is being connected to your own future self and not worrying about what other people think about it. There is no necessarily right or wrong answer to this. It's about being really honest about your future self and being really strategic and honest about what your strategy is, honest about what you're optimizing for, and playing your own game, but learning from other people as well. I simply want you to question what you're optimizing for that should not exist, that should be stripped out if you got clear on your future self and more honest about the process that will get you there. And both the future self, the goal, as well as the process, in my mind, should be intrinsically connected, both internally motivated. So for me, my process and my outcome are the same: writing better books, publishing better books. That's me. Because I'm so dialed on my thesis and I'm continuously questioning my requirements, questioning my assumptions, I'm stripping out things that I thought were necessary to achieve that, such as a YouTube channel, and getting rid of more and more.
Then try very hard to delete the part or process. This is actually very important. If you're not occasionally adding things back in, you are not deleting enough. The bias tends to be very strongly towards, let's add this part or process step in case we need it. But you can basically make in-case arguments for so many things. Only the third step is simplify or optimize. The third step.
So let me just quickly add here. His first step is questioning your own assumptions, questioning your requirements, questioning what you require of yourself to realize your future self. Call it your big picture future self. Also for these 90 days, right? Your impossible goals. And then strip things out. As he said, remove parts of the process. That would be me removing YouTube, me removing various components. If you're not occasionally adding things back in, then you're not stripping out enough. I actually have been stripping out so much that now I'm realizing there's one or two things to add back, which is good, because if you're not adding things back occasionally, then you're not stripping things out enough. And then he says right here, step 3, once you've questioned your assumptions and clarified your logic, right? Clarified your perspective, clarified your thesis, your goal, your strategy, and you've stripped out huge aspects of the process so that you're really dialed and really optimizing the right things, then you optimize the right things. You optimize the process that really matters, and you simplify that. So in my case, I'd be simplifying and optimizing my book process, simplifying and optimizing my book publication process. So you simplify and optimize the thing that really does matter. This is the core bottleneck. This is the area where you're going to transform and become your desired future self. This is the thing you simplify and you build the system around.
Finally, you get to step 4, which is accelerate cycle time. If you're moving too slowly, go faster. But don't go faster until you have worked on the other 3 things first. And then the final step is automate. Now, I have personally made the mistake of going backwards on all 5 steps multiple times. I automated, accelerated, simplified, and then deleted.
So his 4th step is to accelerate feedback loops, accelerate learning cycles. And so, but you do that after you've questioned assumptions, after you strip things out, after you've optimized and simplified the thing that you really want to dial. Then you accelerate the feedback loops like crazy. Accelerate like crazy. That's where you go through the massive transformation. That's where you go through the massive iterations. That's where you go through the massive innovation of ultimately what you're going to transform. I do want you to accelerate, but I also want you to refine your thesis. And it's okay if over time the thesis transforms. Actually, even if you look at Elon Musk, you will see that his own thesis has transformed many times. And as part of the thesis tool and as part of this week's process, I actually do want you to look back on how your own thesis has adjusted, changed over time. And ultimately, I do want you to question your own requirements, question your own assumptions. What aspects of your assumptions are holding you back? We all have a thesis. Every person's thesis is their operating system, and you can see their thesis by simply watching their life. If you go to a grocery store and you see someone working there, that's because their thesis is such that it fits the model of them working at that grocery store, right? The kind of car you drive fits within your thesis of your belief system and what you value and who you think you are and what you think matters. Every aspect of your life reflects on your thesis. Even you being in this challenge reflects on your thesis. First off, study the thesis section in the workbook. It's not finished. It's not refined. I'm going to be updating and finishing the book and sending you more thorough perspectives. But just remember, your thesis comes down to core perspectives, beliefs. Ultimately, that leads to core goals and purposes, as well as core approaches. This fits with frame and floor and focus. These 2 would be your frame, your perspectives and beliefs, as well as your goals and purposes. Those are your frame. And then ultimately your floor and focus. Your floor determines what you say yes and no to, and your focus is how you're going to execute on whatever it is that you believe and you seek. So your thesis lays all of these out in very simple terms. My invitation to you is to do a draft of your thesis. to lay out your core beliefs, which lead to your core goals, which ultimately leads to your core strategy. I have attached a one-page version of my own thesis. Remember, this is just a draft. This is between you and you. Take the time to just do it. As you go through the draft, you'll be able to weed more and more out, just like you're refining a chapter or refining an email, right? As you write, as you boil, as you distill, as you learn more, your thesis will evolve. Keep your thesis one page or less. If you can't boil it down to one page, then you're not dialing down to the core beliefs, the core goal, the core strategy. Remember, you want to question some of the beliefs, some of the goals. Question some of the goals, some of the strategy. So many people have too many goals. So many people have too many strategies. One of the things that I learned when studying constraint theory is that if a system is complex, it will not advance very quickly. A system being complex means that there are conflicting viewpoints, conflicting beliefs. There are too many conflicting goals and too many conflicting strategies. And you see this within a business, for example. If a business is trying to pursue too many things at once and they have too many strategies to do it, if there's too many goals, then there's too many bottlenecks to approach. And if you're trying to attack too many bottlenecks at once towards too many conflicting goals, you're ultimately going to be spinning in circles going nowhere. You want to take a complex system and strip it down so that it becomes a simple system. And a simple system typically only has one goal and has been stripped down to one core bottleneck to ultimately advance to achieve that goal. And so in these 90 days, I invite you to ultimately strip things down to a core goal, which you're going to achieve, which will ultimately enable you to realize many aspects of your desired future self. But also, what's the core bottleneck or core strategy? That's the thing you want to optimize for and accelerate the learning time on. And so that's the thing that you're ultimately going to advance. So keep your thesis one page, continually refine it and enhance it. I also do invite you, though, on a separate section, maybe in your own journal, to reflect on how your own thesis has evolved over time. Think about how your core belief system has changed over time and therefore your core approach to life, your core decisions. I also invite you to examine where you've seen other people or businesses adjust their thesis. Maybe someone was, even a band, right? Like a musical band. They maybe had a thesis and then they shifted it, changed, and that changed their music, right? So I want you to look around and see where you've seen others change their thesis. Sometimes you will go through an entire shift once you get a better perspective, or you're more honest with yourself. All progress starts by telling the truth, or you have a greater understanding. Sometimes that greater understanding comes through study, through perspective, through experience, sometimes through hard experience. I have found that the more honest I am with myself, the more my thesis shifts and becomes simpler and more powerful. And I can weed out more and more of not only false assumptions, but false steps in the process. False goals as well as false strategies. And so as you simplify the belief system down, the core value, the core perspective, and you strip out the goal to a higher and better goal and strip out many of the goals you thought mattered and strip out much of the processes or strategies, then things get really dialed. Then you can accelerate learning times and you're going intensely in a single direction, whereas you know that most people have a complex life and a very conflicted, confused, distorted life. Be willing to have your thesis scrutinized. I invite you to scrutinize it to actually get hard feedback. I have coaches myself, and I get hard feedback. And so part of the big shifts I've made, even in the last 6 months, have come through scrutiny and feedback from my coaches. Even selling my old office house. So many components of my life, my business, my decision-making process, how I parent, are because I'm willing to share my perspectives and have them scrutinized and reflected. And I don't need to take it personally if someone disagrees with what I'm doing. And I don't want you to take it personally. And it doesn't mean that just because someone tells you to do something, it doesn't mean you have to agree with it. But I invite you to actually weigh alternative perspectives and hopefully higher and more mature perspectives and use those to adjust your perspective. Ultimately, strip out more and more, question your assumptions. This is the Musk algorithm. Please take the time to complete the thesis tool in the workbook. Continually refine your thesis, get it down to a single page, submit the first version of it. Just have fun with this. Have fun with this. It is powerful. And by the way, this is how you refine your frame, is to question your assumptions. This is part of becoming aware. They say make the unconscious conscious. You start to become aware of the assumptions driving your life, driving your goals, driving your strategy. Why are you pursuing that? Why are you doing it that way? Well, because of some assumptions and beliefs. And so as you refine and strip out false assumptions, refine and strip out what would be called lesser goals. I love the quote, we're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to lesser goals. There are other goals, competing goals that can be stripped out and let go of entirely. Sometimes winning the game means just simply leaving the game, letting that game go. That game doesn't matter anymore. What's the game you want to play? What's the thing you want to optimize for? Optimize that thing, accelerate the learning cycles on that thing, and then systemize that thing until eventually your thesis evolves and transforms. It's beautiful stuff. It's beautiful work. Super happy to be with you. Let's have a phenomenal, powerful week 3. Let's have a powerful finish to April. A powerful finish to April. April is huge. Week 3 and 4 are huge. I'm with you. Week 3 is a canvas. Be bold, be powerful, be approach-oriented, transform your perspective, maybe let go. Think about how much time and life you could save if you let go of aspects of your assumptions, aspects of goals that you thought you needed to pursue, but now you can let them go entirely. Think about how much life I just gained back by not needing to go to 1 million, 2 million, 3 million YouTube subscribers. How much life did I just gain back? I just gained back potentially years of my life that I can now focus on and optimize towards the things that I really care about based on my thesis, based on what I want to transform, based on where I want to develop unique mastery and skill set, based on who I want to become as my future self. And you'll make much quicker, more powerful quantum leaps as your future self when you strip away the things that are honestly keeping you going in circles. The noise and the distractions, as you strip those things out, as you become honest and dialed with your future self and your process, the core goals and the core strategy that you're going to optimize to getting there. And as you accelerate that, your life becomes simpler, your life becomes more powerful, your life transforms. I'm with you. I love you. This is the Q2 Rapid Transformation Intensive.